even delayed the vote twice to allow for additional diplomatic efforts. Now it is time to renew a mandate that is critical to protecting international peace and security. Last week, during Japan's signature event, we all reaffirmed our commitments to upholding the global nonproliferation regime. It is time to put that commitment into action with today's vote. I urge every single member state to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
The Security Council is today considering a seemingly routine matter of extending the mandate of the panel of experts of the 1718 Sanctions Committee. This mechanism is supposed to provide assistance to the work of the committee to ensure the effectiveness of the restrictions introduced by the Council. However, the technical nature of the mandate should not mislead us. In recent years, the situation on the Korean Peninsula and around it has changed fundamentally. The sanctions regime adopted Security Council resolutions with the noble intentions of preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region. At present, is not only losing its relevance, it is to a great extent detached from reality. We are witnessing an unprecedented policy from a coalition of Western countries led by the USA to strangle Pyongyang, which includes harsh unilateral restrictions, aggressive propaganda, and direct personal threats against the DPRK authorities. Together, all of these measures call into question the very possibility of resolving problems on the peninsula in future. The situation is being brought to an even more dangerous brink by the active militarization of the peninsula with the direct involvement of Washington and other NATO members that are located tens of thousands of kilometers away from the DPRK. What is particularly worrying is that this is the increasingly brazen invocation in the Allies' military maneuvers of Washington's nuclear potential. Such a dangerous turn of events in the region affects the fundamental interests of the Russian Federation in the area of national security. Against this backdrop, it is clear that in recent years, sanctions have not been able to achieve the international community's stated aims and have not led to a normalization of the situation surrounding the This situation is not encouraging the parties to dialogue, particularly after Washington has demonstrated to the entire world the underhanded game that it is playing. And yet, the sanctions impose a heavy burden on the North Korean population. As a result of undermined confidence between the UN and Pyongyang, there are no UN entities present on the country's territory, entities that could deal with this important issue. That state of affairs must urgently be changed. In a certain sense, the DPRK's example is unique. It is only in respect of this country that open-ended Security Council sanctions have been introduced and are being applied. There are no basic mechanisms to alter the restrictions. There is no provision for a fair verdict procedure for the delisting of particular individuals or persons. All of the remaining restrictive measures in respect of individual countries have ultimately realistic aims and are subject to review on a regular basis. In that connection, we are convinced that it is high time for the Council to engage in reflection on updating the sanctions regime in respect of the DPRK. Our country really advanced ideas to that effect and tried to adapt the restrictions to the rapidly changing realities on the ground. One such initiative is the Russian-Chinese humanitarian draft resolution that remains relevant. However, all of our attempts to advance that have time and again come up against the absolute reluctance of Western countries to deviate from their destructive and punitive logic vis-à-vis the DPRK. A weapon in this harmful situation is now the panel of experts of the 1718 Committee. It has ceased to carry out its direct obligations. Its work is increasingly being reduced to playing into the hands of Western approaches, reprinting biased information, and analyzing newspaper headlines and poor quality photos. In so doing, the group is essentially conceding its inability to come up with sober assessments of the status of the sanctions regime. The panel has continued to focus on trivial matters that are not commensurate with the problems facing the peninsula. Against this backdrop, Russia has called for the Council to adopt a decision to hold an open and honest review of the Council sanctions measures in respect of the DPRK, moving the restrictions onto an annual basis. That would allow us to organize a genuinely engaged discussion of the problems that have built up, and also to adapt the Council's measures according to the rapidly changing circumstances. Incentives to dialogue in such circumstances may also become available to Pyongyang. If an agreement is reached for an annual extension of the sanctions, the mandate of the panel of experts would then make sense. It would be able to propose constructive ideas to update the current restrictions. However, the United States and their allies didn't want to listen to us and didn't include our ideas in the draft resolution that is being put to a vote today. In these circumstances, we don't see any added value in the work of the panel of experts of the committee, and we cannot support the American draft. We call on members of the Security Council to listen to our arguments, which aim at finding a way out of this harmful situation. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Korea will vote in favor of the resolution and calls on all members of the Security Council to do the same. The draft resolution presented to us compromise of the views exchanged during the series of negotiations. In this regard, the Republic of Korea highly appreciates the efforts of the United States for professionally drafting the resolution and leading the negotiations as the pen holder. Unfortunately, what should have been a simple technical rollover turned into complicated political negotiations. The panel of experts on DPRK sanctions has been faithfully carrying out its duty for the past 15 years. All of us in this chamber acknowledge and appreciate the dedication and hard work of the panel. The biannual reports by the panel of experts provided all UN member states with valuable information regarding sanctions implementations and violations. The panel also assisted the 1718 committee in playing a crucial role in providing capacity building for better sanctions implementation. Through close collaboration and cooperation among independent experts who work in an independent and professional manner, the panel guided us through the complex web of the DPRK sanctions regime, putting differences arising from geopolitical tensions behind. As everyone in this chamber is well aware, the DPRK's nuclear and ballistic missile program is one of the most serious threats to the global non-proliferation regime. Faced with DPRK's continued provocations, accelerated advancement of its nuclear and ballistic missile programs, and increasingly sophisticated sanctions evasion, the role of the panel has become all the more essential. Failure to adopt this resolution will result in the abolishment of the panel, which is something all council members, in particular the P5, should avoid by all means. Dear colleagues, at this moment, the international community is watching the Security Council. If we are truly to act on behalf of all UN member states and carry out our duty in accordance with the UN Charter, we have to adopt this resolution. As such, we once again urge all Security Council members to vote yes on this important resolution. Let us stand united for the sake of nuclear non-proliferation and international peace and security. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Republic of Korea for their statement. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/255 please raise their hand. Those against? Abstention. The result of the voting is as follows: 13 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 1 abstention. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States is deeply disappointed by the outcome of today's vote. Today's vote was nothing more than the attempt by one council member to silence the independent, objective investigations into DPRK Security Council violations. There is simply no other honest way to view this. It's important to ask ourselves why. Why would any council member not vote in support of this mandate renewal? Why would any council member break the otherwise 14 years of unanimous adoption? Just looking over the DPRK panel of experts' reports, the answer is quite clear. The panel began reporting in the last year on Russia's blatant violations of the UN Security Council resolutions, in addition to the DPRK's persistent sanctions evasion efforts within Russia's jurisdiction. I provide this message to all member states. Russia owns this failure. Russia is the reason you will no longer receive reports from the panel of experts. Today's vote will only embolden the DPRK to act with further impunity, as the DPRK jeopardizes global security through the development of long-range ballistic missiles and sanctions evasion efforts. This is not the behavior of a responsible member state, let alone a permanent member of the Security Council. And China, with its abstention, has once again shown us where it stands on curbing DPRK proliferation. Colleagues, today was not the outcome the United States wanted, nor the outcome the rest of the Council members worked so hard over the last 5 weeks to avoid. The resolution before us was, in the United States' view, far from ideal. But this resolution reflects our most sincere attempt at compromise and flexibility. We commend our colleagues who put aside their differences in support of the panel. But some proposals were simply unacceptable. Unprecedented attempts to silence the panel and otherwise corrupt its independence have no place in any committee. Just as egregious was the proposal to undermine all of the sanctions working to curb the DPRK's unlawful pursuit of WMD and ballistic missiles. You've heard us say it here before, but I'll say it again. The United States will not reward the DPRK for its repeated violations of Security Council resolutions and attempts to undermine the global non-proliferation regime. The DPRK sanctions need maintenance, not elimination, in order to effectively work, especially when it comes to building member states' awareness and capacity to protect against DPRK malicious cyber activity. Moscow has done more today than simply obstruct the work of the 1718 Committee. Moscow has undermined the prospect of a peaceful diplomatic resolution of one of the world's most dangerous nuclear proliferation issues. But let me be clear. Russia, you silenced the panel of experts today, but you will never silence those of us who stand in support of the global non-proliferation regime. The Security Council resolutions and all of their measures against the DPRK's unlawful pursuit of weapons of mass destruction and missiles still remain. And it is the responsibility of every member state to fully abide by these Security Council obligations. The United States remains committed to continue to work with allies and willing partners to hold the DPRK and its defenders accountable for its actions. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, the draft resolution that has just been rejected had a simple goal: to renew for a year the mandate of the 1718 Committee's panel of experts. France supported this draft because the role of the panel of experts is essential. On the 18th of March, North Korea carried out 3 new ballistic missile tests. A few months ago, it put into orbit a military satellite, and for 2 months now, North Korea has been providing Russia with military material in support of its aggression against Ukraine, in violation of many resolutions which Russia voted in favor of. The nuclear testing cannot be excluded. In this context, who can seriously doubt the need to have an independent panel of experts allowing us to document the violations of this Council's resolutions? France deeply regrets the veto today against the renewal of this mandate. This deprives this Council of a key tool to ensure the implementation of its resolutions, including sanctions, but also humanitarian exemptions. The veto deprives all of the member states of a crucial source of information on a matter that is of interest to them for their national and international security. This is a new factor which weakens our non-proliferation architecture. The panel of experts would indeed have remained impartial. It does not judge states. It works on the basis of information which all states are free to share with the panel to carry out analysis which will fuel the discussions in the committee without prejudice to the decisions which the committee will ultimately take. One cannot tell us that we needed to modify or sacrifice the mandate of the panel of experts to allow for a general discussion on the review of sanctions. Existing solutions already provide for the Council to be prepared to review continuation of sanctions regime with regard to the DPRK. This resolution proposed that that review should take place by April 2025. The inclusion of such a paragraph in a text that was not set for that purpose is clearly a sign of significant flexibility. Mr. President, while North Korea is pursuing its destabilizing activities, this Council has the responsibility to act. France will continue to stand ready to assure unity in the Council so we can meet this major proliferation crisis. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And first, allow me to extend our utmost gratitude to the 17A panel of experts and to the US for their work as penholder. The DPRK's nuclear and ballistic missile programs present a global and escalating threat to international security and the global non-proliferation regime. Over the past decade, the panel of experts has played a vital role in constraining the DPRK by exposing the progress of its nuclear and missile programs and other forms of sanctions non-compliance. This veto undermines the panel's work, the integrity of the international nuclear non-proliferation regime, and this Council's credibility in upholding Security Council resolutions. It follows arms deals between Russia and DPRK in breach of UNSCRs. These include the transfer of ballistic missiles, which Russia has then used in its illegal invasion of Ukraine since the early part of this year. Claims that calls for a review of the sanctions regime were ignored are simply not accurate. Let us be clear, nothing in this text prevents the Council from reviewing or amending the sanctions regime should consensus be found. This veto does not demonstrate any concern for North Korean people or for the efficacy of sanctions. It is about Russia gaining the freedom to evade and breach sanctions in pursuit of weapons to be used against Ukraine. The panel, through its work to expose sanctions non-compliance, was an inconvenience for Russia. It is deeply concerning that Russia, a permanent member of this council, has taken such action. But let me be clear to Russia. The sanctions regime remains in place. And the UK remains committed to holding DPRK to account for its compliance with the sanctions regime, and will continue to work with all members in support of the nuclear non-proliferation regime. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Very briefly, Slovenia engaged in good faith in the negotiations of this resolution with the aim to ensure the continuation of the good work that the panel of experts has been doing in supporting the 1718 committee. We deeply regret that despite all the concessions made, a veto has been cast, preventing the mandate renewal of the independent monitoring and assessment of sanctions implementation are invaluable. It is imperative that the wider UN membership has access to professional and objective assessments that guide the Council's activities on this sanctions regime. Only a fully functioning panel of experts is able to provide this. We will continue to engage constructively, and we call on Russia to do the same. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President. We thank the United States as pen holder for their tireless efforts to achieve consensus on this draft. We deeply regret the use of the veto to block the renewal of the mandate of the 1718 Committee Panel of Experts. The current text represents a set of significant compromises on the panel's mandate. First, it accommodated requests to link the renewal of the mandate of the panel to broader discussions on sanctions as well as dialogue on the file. Second, it established the confidential nature of the midterm report, greatly affecting the ability of the wider UN membership to remain informed and engaged on the file. Despite these significant changes, and even though most Council members supported a technical rollover, this text was accepted in the spirit of compromise. Regrettably, the compromise was vetoed by the Russian Federation. We also highlight that a significant cross-regional group of delegations expressed their support for the 1718 panel during the open briefing on Wednesday and called for the renewal of its mandate. It is deeply regrettable that these calls have gone unanswered. President, we strongly agree that dialogue is crucial to achieve progress on the overall file. However, we stress that this resolution was meant to meaningfully renew the panel's mandate. Any discussion on the sanctions architecture, as well as an overarching dialogue on the file, should be kept separate from the panel's mandate renewal. Panels of experts are independent and impartial, and their mandates ought to be treated this way. We reiterate our full support for the work of the panel of experts, including its reporting. It has been a crucial instrument to display the DPRK's sophisticated architecture of sanctions evasion and a crucial source of information for the wider UN membership. National competent authorities who read these reports have been able to use them to keep pace with the ever-evolving means of sanctions evasions investigated by the panel. In the absence of such reports, the DPA's relentless evasion of sanctions will continue to grow unchecked. This is a sad disservice to regional and international peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ecuador voted in favor of the draft resolution put forward by the United States. My delegation is convinced that the collective work and good faith negotiations are essential for effective multilateralism, and they are the best way to uphold responsibilities entrusted to us. Ecuador believes that the text proposed by the penholder contained the necessary basis for the renewal of the 1718 Committee Panel of Experts mandate and the pursuance of its professional and independent work. The search for a peaceful diplomatic and political solution in the Korean Peninsula requires concerted actions and respect for resolutions adopted by this Council. I regret that yet again, this Council was unable to adopt a decision which had garnered overwhelming support from its members due to the use of the veto, in particular when we're speaking about an issue that is so sensitive for international peace and security. I express Ecuador's concern at this outcome. This is a serious threat to the global disarmament and non-proliferation architecture. Moreover, it undermines the efforts of the international community, particularly efforts by this Council. It is weak in capacity to respond, and it may exacerbate tensions in the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, we express our deep regret that the draft resolution adopted. We recognize and commend the penholder, United States, for their efforts. We wish to state that as a council, we have missed a very important information service tool of great benefits in the discharge of the mandates of this council. We treat our strong call for the Security Council to live up to its responsibility to promote international peace and security through the established mechanisms at its disposal in line with United Nations Charter. Thank you.
Thank the representative of Sierra Leone for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President. What we've just heard in this chamber from our Western colleagues only strengthened our conviction that we took the right decision to not support the extension of the panel of experts mandate. NATO members today have essentially dropped their masks and clearly demonstrated why they really want to extend the mandate of the 1718 Committee Panel of Experts to use it to channel founded insinuations against Russia, which we have heard excessively today in this chamber. It is particularly cynical and unfortunate to hear reproaches to us from the US delegation. I'll be frank. Let me be clear. A country which in the last 5 months has 4 times used a veto to give Israel the opportunity to mercilessly kill and starve Palestinian civilians, and which in this chamber declares that Security Council decisions are non-binding, does not have the right to give lessons to others. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for statement. I give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Guyana voted in favor of the renewal of the panel's mandate. We regret that the Council was not able to adopt the text in its current form and urge members to continue working together to find a constructive way forward. Guyana believes that the work of the 1718 Committee, supported by the panel of experts, is vital in monitoring and reporting on the implementation of relevant sanctions measures relating to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We are committed to cooperating with the 1718 Committee to ensure the implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions concerning the DPRK. We hope that the challenges preventing the adoption of the resolution in its current form will soon be resolved, and the mandate of the panel of experts can be renewed as early as possible. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Mr. President, I would like to extend our thanks to the penholder for his efforts.
It is regrettable to witness today an absence of consensus among Security Council members regarding the renewal. The panel of experts is a component in supporting the committee established by Resolution 1718. We acknowledge the concern raised by member states. However, we believe that these could be addressed through constructive dialogue and collaboration within the 1718 committee. Together, we must find a balanced solution that respects the legitimate concerns of all parties. We urge all Security Council members to redouble their effort to find common ground and reach consensus on the renewal of the panel of experts' mandate. Unity within the Council is paramount in confronting global peace and security challenges. We are confident that the Council members have the ability to approach this issue with a spirit of cooperation and compromise. Divergence must not impede the work of our Council. With more flexibility, we can find a solution that allows for the renewal of the panel of experts' mandate and address the issue raised. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Korea voted in favor of the resolution for the reasons that I explained before the vote. Regrettably, the resolution was not adopted. The 1718 committee panel of experts has been taken hostage by one permanent member, the Russian Federation. As Russia puts its blind self-centeredness over the Council's collective responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, the DPRK panel of experts, one of the Council's most vibrant and significant subsidiary organs, has been forced to cease its work. As we all know, the panel of experts has provided valuable information concerning the implementation of sanctions against the world's most serious nuclear proliferator and offered well-documented recommendations to all UN member states so that they can better implement their obligations. It also investigated possible sanctions violations and evasion cases so that member states could address any non-compliance accordingly. The original draft resolution was a technical one. It was meant to simply renew the mandate of the panel of experts. On the other hand, the proposal previously made by Russia included a one-year sunset clause on the entire DPRK sanctions regime per se, tied to the mandate renewal of the panel. Russia employed an all too familiar and obvious tactic by insisting on completely unacceptable conditions without any room for compromise. Russia elicited objections which they gladly took as an excuse to veto. This is outrageous and makes no sense at all, given the continued and accelerated advancement of the North Korean nuclear and missile programs. Pyongyang has been openly denouncing the authority of the Security Council and pursuing an increasingly dangerous and aggressive nuclear policy, in particular targeting the Republic of Korea. At this moment, Russia seems to be more interested in embracing or encouraging the DPRK for its provision of munitions and ballistic missiles for the conduct of war in Ukraine, at the expense of a nuclear non-proliferation regime and proper functioning of the Security Council. There can be no justification for disbanding the guardians of the UN's DPRK sanctions regime, consisting of multiple resolutions adopted unanimously by this Council. This is almost comparable to destroying a CCTV to avoid being caught red-handed. Today, we witnessed yet another setback in the authority of this august body, as well as in the international non-proliferation regime. A permanent member of the Security Council and the depository of the NPT completely abandoned its responsibility. Nevertheless, the Republic of Korea will continue its efforts in collaboration with many like-minded countries toward the goal of CVID, complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the DPRK. We will find our way and expect cooperation from other Council members and all UN member states. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Republic of Korea for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Switzerland thanks the United States for facilitating the negotiation process and for its efforts to reach a consensus. We also acknowledge the commitment of the other members of the Council. Switzerland voted in favour of the draft resolution because we consider, as do the vast majority of other members, that it represents an acceptable compromise. Switzerland regrets that the use of the veto by a single member of the Security Council puts an end to the mandate of the group of experts which supports the work of the 1718 Committee. Targeted sanctions are an important tool of the Council for maintaining international peace and security. The group of experts plays a key role in facilitating their implementation. Its reports, which are reliable, independent, and of high quality, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the experts from the panel of experts, are an essential source of information for the committee and all UN member states, particularly at this critical time when the Democratic People's Republic of Korea continues to significantly accelerate its illicit nuclear and ballistic weapons program. Switzerland will therefore continue to engage with a view to finding other solutions. This decision hampers efforts to monitor and ensure transparency in the implementation of Council resolutions. The arguments for the veto that we have heard will not convince either us or other member states. At a time when the group was investigating violations of sanctions measures, this veto only fuels suspicions regarding such violations. We reiterate that arms shipments from the DPRK are a flagrant violation of international law and contribute to the undermining of the global disarmament and non-proliferation architecture. The committee's mandate remains intact, its task hampered, but as chair of the committee, it is our duty to consider how to provide committee members with the relevant information to assess the implementation of sanctions, to inform all members about the work of the committee, and to support them in their efforts to comply with the resolutions of this council. That is what we will continue to do. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, in 2006, the Security Council adopted Resolution 1718, imposing sanctions, including an arms embargo on the DPRK. Over the past decade or so, the Council has adopted more resolutions to continue to strengthen the sanctions against the DPRK, resulting in a set of extremely stringent sanctions mechanisms. China supports the full and accurate implementation of Council sanctions against the DPRK and supports the DPRK Sanctions Committee and the panel of experts in strict accordance with their mandates to perform their duties independently, objectively, and impartially, so as to promote the sanctions implementation. At the same time, we have always maintained that sanctions are not an end in itself, it's a means. Sanctions against the DPRK should serve the denuclearization of the peninsula, the launch of dialogue and negotiations among the parties, and the final political settlement to the peninsula issue. At the request of China and other members, the Council adopted the DPRK-related sanctions resolution with a reversal clause, which is aimed at aligning sanctions with the overarching goal of a political settlement in a coordinated way, forming effective synergies, thus creating conditions for a final political solution. It's disconcerting that the harsh sanctions against the DPRK have not led to the achievement of the above-mentioned goals. Instead, they have exacerbated tensions and confrontation with a serious negative impact on the humanitarian situation and livelihood on the ground. The original intention of China and Russia in jointly introducing the draft resolution is to activate the reversal clause, adjust the sanctions against the DPRK in a humanitarian and livelihood field, to use the humanitarian issue as an entry point to create conditions for enhancing mutual trust among all parties, and the resumption of dialogue. I would like to stress once again that sanctions should not be set in stone, nor should it be indefinite. I would like to once again to call on all parties to positively consider the Sino-Russian draft resolution. Over the past period, in line with its consistent position, China has participated constructively in the consultations on the draft resolution extending the mandate of the panel of experts of the DPRK Sanctions Committee. Based on the performance of the panel in recent years and the problems that exist, we have put forward proposals to improve the panel's work, which are partially reflected in the draft. We highly appreciate and actively support the Russian proposal to set a time limit for the DPRK sanctions and conduct periodic reviews. We believe that this proposal is to the point, practical, and feasible. If adopted, it would be a great improvement to the sanctions regime and would give impetus to breaking the current deadlock in the situation. Regrettably, the above-mentioned views of Russia have not been taken on board. When the mandate of the panel is yet to expire and when parties still have time for consultations, the draft resolution has been forced to a vote. China has to abstain from the vote on the draft resolution. Mr. President, the current situation on the peninsula is characterized by persistent tensions and growing confrontation, which serves no one's interest. This is the last thing China wants to see. The settlement of the peninsula issue cannot be divorced from political mutual trust and a favorable climate. Blindly increasing sanctions and highlighting pressure will not help us. It will only be counterproductive. Indulging in military alliances and obsession with the military confrontation will only exacerbate antagonism and tensions, making the goal of denuclearizing the peninsula and maintaining its peace and stability even more elusive. China once again calls on all parties to adopt a rational and pragmatic approach, stay committed to a political settlement, resume contacts, build mutual trust, restart dialogue as soon as possible, and do more for peace and stability on the peninsula. The international community, including the Council, should also create a favorable environment to this end. To conclude, I would like to reiterate that China's position on the peninsula issue is crystal clear. We have always been committed to maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula, to advancing in parallel the denuclearization of the peninsula and establishing a peace mechanism, and to resolving issues through dialogue and consultation. As a close neighbor of the peninsula, China will continue to actively maintain stability and promote talks, and play a constructive role in advancing a political solution to the peninsula issue, the early resumption of dialogue among all parties, and the realization of long-term peace and stability in Northeast Asia. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as a representative of Japan. A resolution to fight against North Korea's unlawful development of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles was vetoed again in this chamber. It is deeply, profoundly regrettable to see the result of the voting. To our greatest regret, North Korea is continuing its unlawful nuclear and ballistic missile program in a flagrant violation of Security Council resolutions, and sanction evasions or even sanction violations are being conducted by North Korea and other actors who help them. Nevertheless, the panel of experts, which has been playing a crucial role to fight against these proliferation activities, is now being forced to end its operations due to the veto casted by one permanent member, the Russian Federation, of this august body which bears primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security. We appreciate the tireless effort of the United States as a pen holder to maintain unity among the Council members and ensure the discussions took place in balanced and transparent manner. It is responsible and shameful, especially when the permanent member who wielded its veto power to defend North Korea's unlawful nuclear and ballistic missile program has itself been violating the relevant resolutions by procuring military equipment and munitions from North Korea and using them for its unprovoked aggression against Ukraine in flagrant violation of the UN Charter. It is no exaggeration to say that we are standing at a critical historical juncture for ensuring non-proliferation of WMDs in the future. Nobody, except for the proliferators, would benefit from weakening global non-proliferation regime. Facing the veto today, we now need to engage in discussions on how to combat the proliferation of WMDs and ballistic missiles in the world, where one of the permanent members denied the role of the Security Council in that regard. We will hear the voices of the wider membership during the General Assembly meeting that will be convened in response to the veto today. Japan's commitment to non-proliferation is unwavering. The entire world is watching to see whether all the members of the Council will fulfill the heavy responsibility that has been placed on us. I thank you. I resume my function as the President of the Council. There are no names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Please be seated. The sitting is open. La Cour se réunit ce
The court meets this morning and will meet oral statements and comments on the request for an advisory opinion that the United Nations General Assembly submitted to the court on the question of the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. I shall now recall the principal steps in the present advisory proceedings. On 30 December 2022, by Resolution 77/247, the General Assembly of the United Nations decided to request an advisory opinion from the court. The text of this resolution was communicated to the court by a letter from the Secretary General of the UN, dated 17 January 2023, and received in the registry on 19 January 2023. I shall now ask the registrar to read from the operative paragraph of that resolution on the questions on which the court is asked to render an advisory opinion. Question A. What are the legal consequences arising from the ongoing violation by Israel of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination from its prolonged occupation, settlement, and annexation of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, the character and status of the holy city of Jerusalem, and from its adoption of related discriminatory legislation and measures. Question B. How do the policies and practices of Israel referred to in paragraph 18A above affect the legal status of the occupation, and what are the legal consequences that arise for all states and the United Nations from this status? Thank you, says the President. By an order dated 3 February 2023, the court decided that the United Nations and its member states, as well as the observer state of Palestine, were considered likely to be able to furnish information on the questions submitted to the court for an advisory opinion, and fixed 25 July 2023 as the time limit within which written statements on the questions could be presented to the court, and 25 October 2023 as the time limit within which states and organizations having presented written statements could submit written comments on the other written statements. Ruling on requests submitted subsequently by the League of Arab States, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the African Union, the court decided that these three international organizations were likely to be able to furnish information on the questions submitted to the court, and that consequently they could do so within the time limits fixed by the court. In June 2023, the Secretary General of the United Nations communicated to the court a dossier of documents likely to throw light upon the questions formulated by the General Assembly. The dossier was placed on the court's website. In addition to the dossier, new documents and several translations were communicated to the court by the UN Secretariat in October 2023.
Registry in order of receipt by Turkey, Namibia, Luxembourg, Canada, Bangladesh, Jordan, Chile, Liechtenstein, Lebanon, Norway, Israel, Algeria, the League of Arab States, the Syrian Arab Republic, Palestine, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Egypt, Guyana, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Switzerland, Spain, the Russian Federation, Italy, Yemen, the Maldives, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, the African Union, Pakistan, South Africa, the United Kingdom, Hungary, Brazil, France, Kuwait, the United States of America, China, the Gambia, Ireland, Belize, Bolivia, Cuba, Mauritius, Morocco, Czechia, Malaysia, Colombia, Indonesia, Guatemala, Nauru, Djibouti, Togo, Fiji, Senegal, and Zambia. Then written comments were filed in the registry in order of receipt by Jordan, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Qatar, Belize, Bangladesh, Palestine, the United States of America, Indonesia, Chile, the League of Arab States, Egypt, Algeria, Guatemala, Namibia, and Pakistan. By letters dated October 18, 2023, the registrar informed the United Nations, its member states, and the observer state of Palestine, as well as the League of Arab States, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the African Union, that hearings on the request for an advisory opinion would open on 19 February 2024. For purposes of the current oral proceedings, the following participants set out in speaking order will take the floor: Palestine, South Africa, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Bangladesh, Belgium, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, the United States of America, the Russian Federation, France, the Gambia, Guyana, Hungary, China, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Ireland, Japan, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Mauritius, Namibia, Norway, Oman, Pakistan, Indonesia, Qatar, the United Kingdom, Slovenia, Sudan, Switzerland, the Syrian Arab Republic, Tunisia, Turkey, Zambia, the League of Arab States, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the African Union, Spain, Fiji, the Maldives, and the Comoros. This morning, the court will hear the state of Palestine, which has been allocated a maximum speaking time of 3 hours. All the other participants in the oral proceedings over the next days will speak for a maximum of 30 minutes each. Before inviting Palestine to address the court, I would add that in accordance with Article 106 of its rules, the court has decided that the written statements and written comments submitted in the current advisory proceedings are to be made accessible to the public after the opening of the present. These written submissions will be posted on the court's website at the end of each day for those participating to the hearings on that day. The text of the oral statements will also be placed on the court's website. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Riyad Maliki, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the State of Palestine. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, members of the court, it is an honor and a great responsibility to appear before you on behalf of the people and state of Palestine in these historic proceedings. I stand before you as 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. Half of them children are besieged and bombed, killed and maimed, starved and displaced. As more than 3.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are subjected to colonization of their territory and the racist violence that enables it. 1.7 million Palestinians in Israel are treated as second-class citizens, as unwelcomed intruders in their ancestral land. As 7 million Palestine refugees continue to be denied their right to return to their land and homes. I stand before you as the entire Palestinian people continue to be denied their fundamental rights, their very existence negated. For over a century, the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to self-determination has been denied and violated. Palestine was not a land without a people. It was not. As Israeli leaders have described it, a wasteland. There was life on this land. There was a political life, a cultural life, a social life, a religious life. It had schools and universities, cinemas and cultural halls. It had villages and villagers, families and communities whose life was disrupted by the impact of a promise made thousands of miles away over 100 years ago. A breach of a sacred trust that relegated the indigenous people of the land to the status of non-Jewish communities, according them only civil and religious rights, denying their existence as a people and their rights as a nation, and paving the way for their dehumanization and mass expulsion from their homeland decades later. The United Nations enshrined in its charter the right of all peoples to self-determination and pledged to rid the world of the gravest breaches of this right, namely colonialism and apartheid. Yet, for decades, the Palestinian people have been denied this right and have endured both colonialism and apartheid. There are those who are outraged by the use of these words. They should instead be outraged by the reality we are living. This reality is known by every Palestinian, suffered by millions, generation after generation. It is a reality of the expulsion of the Palestinian people from their own land, not just during the 1948 Nakba, which led to the expulsion of up to 900,000 Palestinians, not just the expulsion of more than 400,000 Palestinians in 1967, but continually, including now, as I address you at this very moment, it is the indiscriminate maiming and killing of Palestinians. It means you can spend the entirety of your life as a refugee, denied your dignity and your right to return home. It means your life and family, your community and home are under constant threat. Your loved ones can be taken away and thrown in an Israeli jail, held there indefinitely. Your land colonized and annexed without hesitation. Freedom is nowhere to be found. There is no safe haven. It means discrimination everywhere and no justice anywhere. It is a reality where Israel can destroy Gaza, killing tens of thousands of Palestinians, almost half of them children, leaving 1 million children starved, terrorized, and traumatized for life, orphaned of a mother, a father, or both, amputated and disabled, leaving nearly 2 million people displaced and desperate with nowhere to shelter onslaught. The genocide underway in Gaza is a result of decades of impunity. Ending Israel's impunity is a moral, political, and legal imperative. Successive Israeli governments have given the Palestinian people only 3 options: displacement, subjugation, or death. These are the choices: ethnic cleansing, apartheid, or genocide. But our people are here to stay. They have a right to live in freedom and dignity in their ancestral land. They will not forsake their rights. I thus implore you, as you hear the legal arguments, not to forget the Palestinian people. Not to forget that our people are struggling every day for their survival as individuals, families, communities, as a nation. That less than a month ago, this court ordered provisional measures in a landmark case brought by the Republic of South Africa against Israel under the Genocide Convention, an order that Israel continues to defy with impunity. For decades, Israel is committing violations that are inherent to its presence in our land and colonial objective. This occupation is annexationist and supremacist in nature. It is a deliberate, cynical perversion of international law. It is thus illegal. The only solution consistent with international law is for this illegal occupation to come to an immediate, unconditional, and total end. As you affirmed 20 years ago, the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination. It is an erga omnes right. It is non-negotiable, non-derogable. Occupying power, including Israel, can be granted a perpetual veto over the rights of the people it occupies. Allow me now to show you 5 maps. The first one is historic Palestine. This is the territory over which the Palestinian people should have been able to exercise their right to self-determination. Instead, the General Assembly recommended the partition of Palestine, ignoring the will of our people as shown in the second map. With the Nakba that ensued, Over 2/3 of our people were systematically and forcibly expelled by Israel. And 3/4 of Palestine became Israel, as shown in the third map. This was the start of the Nakba, the dispossession, the displacement and replacement of our people, the denial of rights and discrimination that continues to this very day. In 1967, Israel then occupied the remainder of Palestine, and from the first day of its occupation, started colonizing and annexing the land with the aim of making its occupation irreversible. It left us with the collection of disconnected Bantustans, preventing the independence of our state, as shown in map 4. Israel wanted the geography of Palestine, but not its demography. So it kept pushing our people out of their homes, out of their land. Here is the fifth map. It was displayed by Israel's Prime Minister to the General Assembly last September. He called this the new Middle East. There is no Palestine at all on this map, only Israel, comprised of all the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This shows you what the prolonged, continuous Israeli occupation of Palestine is intended to accomplish: the complete disappearance of Palestine and the destruction of the Palestinian people. There can be no justification for these injustices and indignities. Allowing them to continue is unacceptable and inexcusable. Acquisition of territory by force, persecution, racial discrimination and apartheid against people, denial of self-determination are all grave violations of the most fundamental norms of international law. There is legal and moral obligation to bring them to a prompt end. Mr. President, members of the court, the State of Palestine reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the rule of international law, which must finally prevail. The force of the law must prevail over the unlawful use of force. We said years ago that we made a choice: justice, not vengeance. But justice delayed is justice denied. And the Palestinian people have been denied justice for far too long. We believe in the universal principles crafted over decades to save successive generations from the scourge of war and oppression. It is time to put an end to the double standards that have kept our people captive for far too long. International law must be applied to all states without exception. No state can be absolved of its obligations under the law, and no people can be deprived of its protection. Palestine legitimately seeks the fulfillment of the rights of our people, including the independence of the State of Palestine on the pre-1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in accordance with international law and United Nations resolutions. This is the historical compromise we agreed to. A just and lasting solution with two democratic states, Palestine and Israel, living side by side in peace and security. We seek peace, which can only be rooted in justice. When we committed to the peace process 3 decades ago, we did it in the belief and expectation that international law would finally be upheld. Not that this process would witness its continued breach. We did so expecting that the rights of our people would finally be fulfilled, not further denied. By determining the law and the obligations of all states and organizations, this court can help chart a path for peace, anchored in justice and respecting international law. It has taken the Palestinian people decades of painful struggle to stand before you. We appeal to the court to uphold our rights to self-determination, return, and all other human rights, including by declaring that the Israeli occupation is illegal and must end immediately, totally and unconditionally. Mr. President, members of the court, I will be followed today by 6 speakers on behalf of the State of Palestine. First will be Professor Andreas Zimmerman, who will address the court's jurisdiction to answer the General Assembly's questions and the absence of compelling reasons that might lead the court to decline to do so. Next will be Mr. Paul Reichler, who will demonstrate the illegality of Israel's prolonged occupation, because its annexation of Palestinian territory, including through widespread colonization, is intended to be permanent, in violation of the prohibition of the acquisition of territory by force. The next speaker will be Ambassador Namira, who will address the system of persecution, racial discrimination, and apartheid that Israel is imposing over people, means of maintaining its control over the land by the subjugation of the indigenous Palestinian people. She will be followed by Professor Philip Sands, who will demonstrate how Israel's dispossession, displacement, and replacement of the Palestinian people and discrimination against them has led to the wholesale denial of their inalienable right to self-determination. The court will then be by Professor Alain Pillay, who will identify the legal consequences that follow from Israel's grave and ongoing violations of peremptory norms. These legal consequences necessarily include the obligation to bring this unlawful occupation to an end and to dismantle the colonial and supremacist architecture, legal and physical, that Israel has consolidated over decades. The final speaker of the State of Palestine will be Minister Riyad Mansour, our permanent representative to the United Nations. Minister Mansour will focus on the permanent responsibility of the United Nations and the obligations of all states to bring this injustice to a swift end, so as to uphold the laws, fulfill the Palestinian rights, and achieve a just peace for all. Many states will also stand before this court, informed by their own history of occupation, colonialism, and apartheid. They will stand here on principle to defend the international law-based order. And millions around the world will be watching, hoping that their faith in the international system can be restored, and that the Palestinian people will not be abandoned or discarded as expendable. Palestine remains the greatest test of the credibility of this international law-based order, a test humanity cannot afford to fail. Mr. President, members of the court, the State of Palestine expresses its fullest confidence that you will discharge sacred duties entrusted to you with the wisdom, fairness, and justice that the world expects and needs of you. I thank you for the honor of addressing you, and I now request, Mr. President, the court to call on Professor Zimmerman. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Maliki for his opening statement. I now give the floor to Professor Andrea Zimmerman. You have the floor, Professor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mr. President, members of the court. Let me start by expressing my honor to appear once again before the court. This is even more true this time, since the current proceedings address issues that have been of utmost relevance for the international community for decades, and indeed for the United Nations since its very inception. These issues lie at the very heart of the organization's ability to achieve international peace and security, now more than ever. I will present Palestine's arguments on jurisdiction and admissibility. I can and will be succinct, as there is no doubt that the court has jurisdiction to give the requested opinion and that there are no compelling reasons for the court to decline to issue the requested opinion. Rather, to the contrary, compelling positive reasons exist for the court to address the legal questions referred to it, as the court's legal determinations will assist all parties as to the legal parameters that must be adhered to. The court's determinations are both urgent and relevant, given Israel's manifold violations of preemptory norms of international law, which continue and intensify on a daily basis. Mr. President, the court clearly has jurisdiction to provide the requested opinion. The General Assembly is obviously competent to request the opinion in line with Article 96(1) of the Charter. Moreover, Resolution 77-247 was adopted by a clear majority and in full compliance with both the requirements of the Charter and the Assembly's rules of procedure. The questions posed by the General Assembly are also plainly legal in character. And as the court has repeatedly and consistently confirmed in its jurisprudence, the fact that the questions may have political implications is irrelevant and does not bar the court from fulfilling is no reason, let alone a compelling one, for the court to decline to issue the requested opinion. On the contrary, manifold reasons exist which confirm that an answer by the court to these questions is of utmost importance for the General Assembly, the United Nations at large, and the international community as a whole. First, the questions concern serious breaches of jus cogens and erga omnes norms. As my colleagues will show, those breaches by Israel include violations of the prohibition of acquisition of territory by force, the prohibition of racial discrimination and apartheid, the denial of the right of self-determination, as well as other egregious violations of international human rights and humanitarian law of the same character. Accordingly, all states, as well as the United Nations in toto, have a legally protected interest in having those violations in both their individual and cumulative manifestations, as well as their legal consequences laid out and clarified by the court, so as to guide them in their future actions. Second, the questions concern the United Nations' continuous responsibility for resolving the question of Palestine. This responsibility stems from its duties relating to matters of international peace and security arising under the Charter, and as the court put it, quote, has its origin in the mandate and the partition resolution concerning Palestine, end quote. This responsibility continues as confirmed by the unequivocal and contemporary practice of the General Assembly, the Security Council, as well as other United Nations organs and bodies. And as the court had previously reiterated in its wall advisory opinion, there exists, and I quote, a permanent responsibility of the United Nations towards the question of Palestine until the question is resolved in all its aspects in a satisfactory manner in accordance with international legitimacy, end quote. The questions put before the court by the Assembly thus seek the court's legal guidance on matters of fundamental and long-standing importance and concern to the United Nations. Third, all of the grounds for declining to issue an opinion suggested in the submissions of a few states